some guts. You can't escape me. Come get me if you can.
I'm the owner of Galloping Ghost Productions, Galloping Ghost Gamma, Galloping Ghost Reproductions, and the Galloping Ghost Arcade, which is the largest arcade in the world. The first arcade game that I ever played, I was super young, but I just saw this glow. Walking up to it, just seeing the glow from that monitor, I remember it to this day, and I remember it rolling in that first quarter, and it was just very special. It sticks in, I think about it constantly. I was very fortunate growing up. There was a bunch of arcades around us. Every restaurant had an arcade game in it. The cool thing about it was that the arcades were so different from one another. The lighting would all be different, the games that they had, and just like the general atmosphere to the arcades. To me, that's so satisfying because when I do think back of all the arcades that I had growing up, most of them have closed or don't have traditional arcade games anymore.
Okay guys, really quick. We have 630 arcade games in here. It's all unlimited free play until we close at 2 in the morning. If the game is ever asking for a coin or a credit, there's going to be a red button next to the coin door that looks like that. Press it and the game will start right up.
I pretty much inhabited arcades most of my late 70s, early 80s, so a lot of this stuff in here is nostalgia.
Definitely nostalgia. I mean, you grew up playing these games, you could only play them in the arcade. They were better than the consoles.
I don't know, I grew up with these games, so it's pretty exciting because you don't usually see these kind of things anymore, so.
I mean, like, sometimes, like, you know, you find, like, maybe some, like, little arcade machines, like, maybe in some store, but never anything, like, actually, like, in an arcade, basically, before, you know?
The decline of the arcades, some people claim it happened at different times. In all honesty, it's always been there. You'll get classic players that say that '84 was the end of it. And then you'll get people that say, like, nah, it really kind of died in, like, '91. And really what was happening is it's just changing generationally. You've got the classic games. After that, in the '90s, that's when the fighting games took over. So then there's this huge stretch of fighting games. And then after that, people say, yeah, it really ended around then, '98, '99. But that's when, like, a lot of the shmup games and the shooters came into play. And after that, it was the dancing games and the rhythm games. And it's always been there. I honestly think to this day, the industry does a lot of things that's very detrimental. There's things that the companies could be doing to bring it back in full force, but for whatever reason, they just don't. The demand is there.
When people think arcade, they think of everything being primitive. Like, why am I going to go to an arcade when I can play something on a home console? But it's a totally different experience. With a home console, you don't appreciate the artwork that's on the bezel or the control panel or the side artwork or the camaraderie that you have, you know, actually seeing other players that have the same interest in the game that you do.
Yeah, playing in an arcade gives you the original feeling of, like, what games are really about, because nowadays you can get a game from anywhere and you can just play it on, like, a console at home. But, like, when you come to an arcade, you're getting the original feeling to, like, know what it's like to be in the atmosphere of just games.
That's the good stuff. See, I don't consider this a collection. This is a finished collection. Maybe one more. Yeah. So this was with the movie coming out, and you can see it's signed by Jeff Nauman and dedicated to me. And it is all the original source code to Rampage, and it lists all the cities and the days that are listed in the game, to see how it all fit together and how complicated games used to be to make, where you had to type in everything, and if a hyphen was in the wrong spot, the game wouldn't run at all. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's just so much code. And it's part of history. I had always wanted to work in the video game scene. I was collecting and playing video games super early on, and when the 16-bit era hit, I got just entrenched in it and just collected literally every single Genesis game that ever came out. My passion for video games just grew. I was a huge Mortal Kombat fan, and back in the day I met Ed Boon when I was working at the Golf Mill Babbage's. He was very quiet. Myself, I had all sorts of social problems. I was super shy. I couldn't stand talking to people. It really bothered me. But it was Ed Boon, and I was like, I've got to talk to this guy, because I never thought I would ever meet the man. He was buying something, and I was like, oh, you're Ed Boon, and he'd probably gotten it 1,000,000 times before. I was like, oh, I really want to get into the video game industry, and I can do this and this and this, and he was just kind of like, that's good. Keep trying, good luck. After the meeting, I was like, wow, Ed Boon didn't want to hear anything that I had to say. It was like, okay, I'm going to go open my own company and really do this. A month or so ago, Ed stopped out here, and he's walking down the street, and we've talked a handful of times, but he's like, what got you into game design? And I was kind of like, in all honesty, it was like you were a cornerstone of what pushed me into it, because he was just being totally honest. It's tough to get in the scene, so it was very beneficial, and definitely owe him a debt of gratitude for how that went down. It just seemed apparent that the easiest way to get in the industry was to open my own company. The Galloping Ghost company as a whole started out as Galloping Ghost Productions, which was a company that was designed to create arcade video games. What would become the Galloping Ghost Arcade was actually not even supposed to be my arcade. 2009, one of our actors had just sold his business, and he knew that I had several business models that I had written, one being for the arcade. And he was like, oh, can I use that business model? I'm like, yeah, whatever, go, like, by all means. And he's like, would you want to partner up on this? Sure, like, why not? In 2010, we opened up the Galloping Ghost Arcade, which was a way to not only help us get arcades back out on the map and get people to get reinterested in them and help revitalize the industry, but it would also be a place for us to put our arcade games that were coming out.
When Doc hit us up, like, hey, we're going to open up an arcade, it's like, okay, so another new project now.
We started driving all over Illinois and Wisconsin looking for venues that had arcades. Most of the arcades, if you heard about them, they were closing. There were so many places that they would have machines, but none of them would work. Like, I couldn't even find a working Mortal Kombat 2. We went to 80 venues, and there was not a working Mortal Kombat 2 in Chicago. And that greatly bothered me. That was really the catalyst of what started the business model of, like, yeah, we got to make an arcade that's really on top of things, and you can go play all these old games. I found a batch of games out in Iowa, and it was 114 machines for $5,000. It was like 40 bucks a machine.
This kind of like barn find. Barn finds are a huge thing in like the car scene, you know. You get like some ridiculously old SL Mercedes, and it's been sitting there forever, and then you get it, and it's like you could see what it could become. And in some cases, like, it's got rust on it, and there's like a bird living in the air intake. It's got no tires, and you pull it out and you take it to your garage and you kind of sweat all over it and bring it back to life. And it's kind of like the same thing with arcade cabinets.
We took all our production guys and we rented 6 or 7 trucks and drove out to Iowa, loaded them up with arcade games and drove them all back.
It was a 26-hour day for me. I remember having a 5-hour energy drink and pretty much hallucinating when on the drive back. When we acquired those original games, we had to learn basically everything.
Of the original 114, only 8 of those turned on. It was months and months of just restoration. Everything got new power supplies, tons of monitors to fix, all new controls on stuff.
So as far as fixing an arcade cabinet, you're talking about after 1980 something, they're all standardized. So they're all the same inside. A wire harness, a power supply, the board, the monitor, and then you just have your controls.
So we just finished turning on all the machines here this morning. Next thing we do is kind of go around and see what's down. Right now, NARC, one of my favorite games, is actually off, so we'll get that back up later today. We have to basically go through all the games, and there's about anywhere between 40 and 60 daily machines that we have to do something to make sure that they play properly for everybody throughout the day. And basically we just go through and see if there's anything new that's down, and then spend the rest of the day trying to fix it and talking with people that are coming to play all this stuff. So,
fixing a game, just fixing anything in general, just starts with like, all right, what's going on here? You look at it, you get a new to us machine that's been sitting around in some guy's garage for 20 years, plug it in, does it turn on? It's just like, oh, my car's not running, what's the deal here? And then you just troubleshoot it. It is like, oh, we got this crazy old car, let's restore the body. And then guess what? There's this ridiculously old 8-liter V8 engine you have to put in here that nobody has parts for anymore, and you have to make stuff for it. And you turn it on and it's go, 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 go. And you're like, come on. And like the screen might have some graphical errors, but it works for the better. And you're like, wow.
without any further ado, let's unveil today's Monday mystery game. It's just one. It's Arm Champs 2 from Jellicoe. The Return, 1992.
And it's like taking your car to the car show. It's like, man, look at this crazy old car that I restored. I've never even seen one of these things. And yeah, that's just like that. It's like, man, these things are hidden, and you kind of come across and find them, and then you bring them back up, and it's like, wow, you'll never see anything this cool again.
We've had so many people fight against this game. So many people love this game.
So by the time we had set our opening date on August 13th, we had 130 machines up and running. We had asked around to a few different towns, and honestly, nobody wanted an arcade to open in their town. There was very little information as to what an arcade would bring to it. Most places look back at, oh yeah, I remember arcades, and there's crime and mafia and gangs.
When Doc was trying to open the place, a bunch of cities didn't want to have us. There was a few places that were like, oh no, that leads to gangs, that leads to violence. Next thing you know, we're going to have a gun problem. There was this stereotype that gamers were going to be up to no good, and that certainly wasn't the case. They were just there to play games.
Everybody thought the arcade wasn't going to work. Industry people were saying that, yeah, this is going to be a few months, and it's an arcade in 2010. And it's like, how could this work? Nobody's heard of this. Like, you're not charging quarters. Like, that doesn't work. Like, who's going to pay $15 to go play arcade games? Since we opened, we've always had an entry fee to the arcade, whereas obviously most arcades have always been quarter driven. The psychology behind what we wanted to give the players was very different. And the games were made to take your quarters. We wanted people to be there all day with us and get into these games, and really, we wanted to build a community behind the place. It wasn't rush in, get people in, get their quarters on them, get them out so the next person could come in and play. It was, come check out all these crazy games that you probably never played before. If they don't like a game, it's like, yeah, this one isn't for me. It's not that, okay, well, I've invested something in it. It's, I can walk away from it and I can try 100 games in one day if I wanted to. So it didn't take long for people to be very much on board, to see the value in it. You take away all the negativities of people running out of money. It's just like, come spend the day. Everybody was asking how many redemption games we were going to have, like ticket games. I'd tell them 0. Like, we'll never have one of those in here. And people are like, that's going to be 75, 80% of your business. People were asking if we were going to have alcohol. Absolutely not. I just wanted arcade games. Most places, when they open, they're either looking for new stuff or classic stuff. They put themselves in the genre. The arcade it's a little more personal and on the selfish side there, because the game lineup is, in all honesty, it's just stuff I want to play.
It's the evolution of gaming. You've got stuff here that was here from the 70s and almost up to present day, just the whole industry. That's what I'm jealous about with the younger kids that come here, is that they didn't have to wait for the sequel to Mortal Kombat 1 or Street Fighter 1. Everything's here for them already. And you could see stuff from the most primitive graphics to the most advanced graphics, and go by game, aisle by aisle, to basically have a history lesson on how everything progressed.
The other side of the collection, to me, beyond the games are this tangible thing, but collecting the history and the backstory and all this stuff. If people knew half of what I've gotten to see and hear and learn about the games that I love so much, and I know everybody loves them so much, it's like, I don't know, you just want to share it all. It's hard to explain. It's something that I'm the luckiest man in the world to be able to do what I do.
It went from just getting games to Doc looking for rare games. I mean, he's had games donated to him that were one of a kind. So that those people don't want something sitting in the basement. It should be allowed for everybody to play. To me, that's probably the biggest compliment that anybody can give Doc or the arcade, is that, here, I have something that somebody would pay a ton of money for, but you can have it for, a low price or for free or whatever. And it's evolved to what it is now, where you have one-of-a-kind games out on the floor.
It's amazing to have a one-of-a-kind arcade game. We've been very fortunate in being able to collect the ones that we've got. We've got a lot of prototype games, a lot of one-of-one games. Some of them have come direct from personal collections of the actual people that designed them. Brian Colin, for example, who created games like Rampage and Xenophobe and Arch Rivals. He saw the arcade as just a great place to connect back with the people that enjoy his games. As a show of support to us, he had a game called International Team Laser, which they made one prototype cabinet for. He donated that to us, along with another game called RC Squared, and was pretty much, he was like, I want to donate these to the arcade, and if you can get them working, people can enjoy them again. And we had this huge launch party event for them. We were already running a tournament, and we put these games out that people had never seen before. It was just absolutely amazing. The continued response to those games is just unbelievable, because it's something that people weren't even sure that if it even really existed. Same thing with games like Primal Rage 2. We managed to fix the board, and it was just unbelievable. Like, I was so excited that we actually had it. So we made a video for it.
And now we are very fortunate enough to give everybody the opportunity to play
Primal Rage 2, which did not actually come out. This is the prototype.
Everything just went absolutely crazy. We were doing this live stream, we're about to go on a live stream. One of the creators of the game called me up, and this guy called me up, his name was Chris Tang, who is a well-known game designer, and he did a lot of the animations on Primal Rage, and just started talking to me. He's like, I can't be at home to watch the stream tonight. He's like, but this is very important to me, and I need to talk to you tomorrow about this. Next day he calls me up, and we did like an 8.5-hour stream. And he's like, I got home at about 2 in the morning. I watched the entire stream from start to finish. And he's like, it was bringing tears to my eyes. He had worked on this game for Atari, and Midway bought Atari and basically closed all the Atari projects, one being Primal Rage 2. And it was like the one game that Chris had worked on that people said was just a bad game. And he's like, I heard your guys playing the game at a professional level and enjoying it, hearing them react to seeing stuff for the first time and finding finishing moves.
Oh! Fatality! We got a new one.
It meant so much to him to have that happen. This game that everybody said was just this trash game, for really high-end players to be like, wow, this is something really special. The game was supposed to come out in like 97, so 13, 14 years of people saying this game doesn't exist anymore and is terrible if it did. It's all been wrong. It's so amazing to be able to take this game, put it back on the floor, have people travel in from everywhere. We had a couple travel in from Oregon. They hitchhiked to get here just to play Primal Rage 2. Like, I can go on and on and on about most of our prototypes have come in very special ways. Arcade games resonate with people on so many different levels. It's not just the timing of when they came out for everybody. It just brings with it such a unique social aspect to it. And a lot of the games, they do mean so much to so many people. While the prototypes mean a lot because the developers finally get to see what a game would mean to somebody had it ever come out, watching the players come in and see a game that they haven't seen in forever. We had one guy that came in, you can always see, he had never been there before. You can see the people that come in, they're kind of like, what's going on? Why is all this here? This guy was giving that kind of vibe, so I'm like, hey, how's it going? Your first time here? And he's like, yeah, are you selling all these? And I'm like, no, we're a functioning arcade. And he's like, can I look around? And I'm like, yeah, take a look around. So he walked in and he turns a corner and he goes up an aisle and he turns and he just stops. And I'm kind of looking at him, he just starts crying. And I go over to him like, you all right, man? Like, everything okay? And he looked down the aisle and he saw NBA Jam. And it's like, NBA Jam, I love the game, great game, but it's common. It's like you see them all over the place. Back in the day, you saw them all over the place. He starts telling me the story about how he and his brother used to play that game every day after school. He would go, and there was like a hamburger place that had it. His mom wouldn't get home until late. Him and his brother would just pump quarters in this thing nonstop. And he's like, my brother passed away. And he's like, it just hit me with everything. Every time we had played together. And it just made him react. I spent so much time in the arcade. I went with my dad all the time, I went with my brother, I went with my friends. I see all that and I relive it all every time I see like a parent and their kid playing Rampage or Q*bert, and it's like, man, you just see the connection. Initially when we opened, my business partner, it was like, he would put football on the TVs and stuff. You would come in on the weekends and it was like, he'd be standing there and there'd be 8 guys watching TV and their kids are running off. That's terrible. They should be enjoying these games, not doing 2 things in different places. The focus has to be on getting people to enjoy this stuff, and you see it every single day. It's hard for me to not be in there and I'll see 3 people playing Rampage, take a picture and send it to Brian Cole and be like, look, that game came out 32 years ago and there's still people enjoying that. The games have stood the test of time, and it's something that most of the games now, they come out a month later, you don't hear about them again. But these games, there's just some weird connection to them.
I think Galloping Ghost offers the unique experience with the nostalgia factor for parents and being able to bring their kids somewhere to, hey, I used to play that game when I was your age, or we can play this together. And it's also neat seeing a parent being able to beat their child in a game rather than it being vice versa at the console at home. A lot of parents I know have an issue with how many buttons are on the controller. Everybody can pick up on the old games. I don't want to say they're not as involved or advanced as the stuff for the consoles now, because there is a lot of strategy involved for a lot of the old games, figuring out patterns, what to do on what specific stage or whatever. There is logic to it. But the thing is that as far as just being able to go to machine and being able to figure out what to do within the first 5 minutes, I mean, every game that I've bought for a current console has some sort of tutorial to it.
The classic games are just unbelievably well designed. At the time, there wasn't a bunch of sequels. Like everything now, it's so much safer to make a new sequel to a game than to create an entirely new IP. So they just keep doing that. And that's kind of, in a way, stunted some of the innovation. But if you look in the arcade, there's just so many games that it was like, hey, let's try this. And there's still nothing else like that game to this day. And it's like, to see kids play stuff like that and get into it, it's going to perpetuate arcades forever. And half of it is like, it's the great games, half of it is this social element, and it's like so many different things just compile to make it just in something that you can't emulate anywhere else. After about 8 months of us being open, everything changed. The towns that had rejected us were coming to us asking to open the arcade, just move over to their town.
The arcade now drives everything else. It's like the guys that have the world's largest arcade are making their own fighting game. Guess what? Those guys, they're opening a gym. That's gonna be awesome. The MK guys are teaching over there. That's really cool.
Toru Iwatani, who is the creator of Pac-Man, and he came to the arcade. He had heard about our place out in Japan and had to come. He's taken pictures of like every machine because he hasn't seen half these games. It's all original arcade hardware, like we don't allow any emulation or anything. It was never the intent to be the largest arcade in the world. We just wanted to do what we were doing very well. I'm an obsessive compulsive collector. Back in my Sega Genesis days, I would buy literally every commercially released game. It didn't matter what it was. If it was a terrible game, I would spend $60 on it just because I wanted to have all of them. The experience that happened in the 80s, it's slightly different than what it is now in a sense. There were new games coming out, but in a lot of ways you do kind of experience exactly how it was and much more. To me, when I had to leave the arcade, that was the end of my fun time. It was, the day is over. That's been taken out of it now. It's just literally come hang out all day. It means so much to me when I'm able to put a new arcade game on the floor that's been out for 30 years that these guys have never even heard of. It's so satisfying to watch them step up to it for the first time. Watching them squint their face up of like, I've never heard that game before. Like, what is this? To me, that's how I used to be when I would walk around the arcade. I would walk past a game and be like, oh, this wasn't here last week. What is this? Do I want to play this? That's what made the arcade so cool back in the day, was finding all those new games, and it all still happens. I've talked to so many people that have traveled in. They tell me about their experiences back in the 80s, and my goal was to make it better than any arcade I ever went to, and I can't think of any arcade that I have had more fun at than ours.
I know this is like an impossible question, but is that your favorite game, or do you not have a favorite game or game series?
It is excessively difficult for me to say my absolute favorite. I used to never give a solid answer for that, but
Hydro Thunder is probably one of the, like, if there was just line of games and Hydro Thunder is there, I'd probably sit down and play Hydro Thunder.
Two of my favorite games, but two games that I hate the most: Donkey Kong and Centipede.
I usually go back to either Contra or Super Contra. I'm a huge fan of the Contra games.
Probably Off-Road. I'm a big fan of that one.
Very fun. It's Street Fighter. Street Fighter, of course.
It might still be Narc. That was the first game I bought.